When God promised Abraham that he will bless him, God says, I'll make your seed numerous like the stars of heaven. Every time you look up Abraham, you have no seed. Remember what I've said. I will make your seed as numerous as the stars of heaven. So at night time you are able to see the stars. Sometimes discouragement comes at night time. And God has a word for you in the night time. The enemy comes around in the night time to remind us that God will try to deceive us and lie to us that God is not able. In the daytime, God said to Abraham, look down. He says, do you see the sand? And God says, I will make your seed numerous like the sand. Abraham at that time had no child. And God had promised him a child. Just we go through these situations as well. God promises things. He speaks to our hearts. We are so clear about those promises. But you always find out that over a period of time, the human nature begins to kick in. The human nature is a fallen nature. And that human nature depends on, feelings. Over time, we feel good when something happens. We feel good, but that feeling doesn't last long. And so when God speaks, it's so powerful, it's as if it's going to happen tomorrow, or that same week, or that same month. But with Abraham, many months passed, many years passed, and the human nature kicked in. You begin to reflect, and you begin to wonder, how can this thing be? So many years have gone now, and even Abraham began to speak to the Lord. You see that in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 15. He said, Lord, shall Eliezer, this was a servant that was born in his house, and he was a trusted servant, and Abraham began to think, he's just like my son anyway. He was born in my house and brought up as a son, but it was not from his own bowels. And so he began to think, maybe this boy is going to be my heir and inherit the blessing. And God said, no, the inheritance will come from your own body, from your own wife. Obviously, Abraham began to scratch his head and thinking, are you sure, Lord? And after a time, what happened? Again, the human nature kicked in, and his wife, Sarah, because she had now years gone, and she's gone far beyond childbearing age, and she just thought, okay, it wasn't Eliezer, so God has promised us a child. It's probably going to be with another person. And Hagar became a surrogate mother. And even though they stepped out of the will of God, according to the book of Romans, it says that Abraham did not grow weary when it came to faith, but he was strengthened by praising God. So what happened? If Abraham in the end laid with Hagar, what happened? It was his wife that encouraged him to do so. She thought this is the only way that we're going to have a child, because she was saying it's far too old, it's impossible. Obviously they didn't have anything to measure it by, so you can understand. You could understand why they thought that you and I would have been in the same situation. Now, today, we've got a lot of things to measure God's word, God's promises by. We can see things that just look over and done and finished, and we read the end of the book, don't we? We see what happened. We saw what happened with Job. Imagine in Job's day, he just thought, well, goodness me. So Hagar had a child, Ishmael. And it wasn't to some many years later that God came to him a year in advance through angels and told him that by this time next year, Abraham, you or Sarah is going to bear a child. And these angels were with Abraham in a tent set by God. And Sarah heard that and she laughed. And she laughed. I mean, you could understand. You know, she's 99. You know, I'm going to have a child. You know, who have heard of this? This is never ever. There's nothing. No one. This can't happen. This is crazy. I'm far too old. How can I have a child? And she laughed, and the angel said, "Why did you laugh?" No, I didn't laugh. It was just fear. It just was fear that she was lying. You know, but you did laugh. No, I didn't laugh. And out of fear, she began to lie. But God still did not withhold that blessing. And as God has spoken, the year came and Abraham had a child. That really speaks volume, because prior to that, what God did to really show Abraham that he means what he said, he made a covenant. He told Abraham to get 5 different types of animals and cut them in pieces and put them on either side. And what took place, God caused a deep sleep to come on Abraham. And the Bible says in the book of Hebrews, because God could swear by no one greater than himself, because there isn't, that he swore by himself. And God came down and walked through those pieces of animals, because he was setting up a covenant. And then God spoke to Abraham concerning what was going to happen to the children of Israel many years later, and so forth. But he made a covenant. So every person that God raised up, he made a covenant. And God swears by no one else but himself that he will bring that covenant to pass. I want us to forward wine, because when we look at all the covenants that God made, and he always made it with blood. It was made with blood. And he swore to them that he would do this, he would do this, and he would do that. Just to show that who he is, and we can see that everything that God said he did. And so the greatest of that covenant that he spoke to Abraham was that your seed will be numerous like the stars. And what that was speaking of, that was speaking of future tense, because Abraham from his wife only had one son, which was Isaac. So Abraham passed on now to heaven, and you have Isaac. Isaac had only one son. And Isaac passed on, and Jacob now had what? 12 sons, where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. And from that, a nation was formed. But God said to Abraham, the whole earth will be blessed because of you. Because of you. And what God was speaking of was his son. God was speaking of his son, Jesus Christ, that will come through that same lineage. And look at this, church. At the communion service, at the Passover, Jesus now initiates and establishes a new covenant, a contract. The old covenant was a stopgap. It wasn't perfect, because although animals were used as a sin offering, but it had to be repeated again and again and again. So it was imperfect. It wasn't perfect. Okay? But all those animal sacrifices was pointing. It was a shadow and pointing to the great sacrifice that was to come. The Lamb, who was Jesus Christ. And so now, just before he was betrayed, the Bible says he took bread now and broke it. And he says, this is my body which is given for you. And then he says, after supper, poured the wine, he says, this is the new covenant, and it's going to be made with my blood, not with the blood of animals. With the blood of animals, the people's sins were covered up. With the blood of animals, there were promises that they received. This was to be a better covenant. This is the New Testament now. And Jesus says, this will be made with my own blood. Now, a covenant is like a will, a last testament. Now, a testament cannot be activated until the testator is dead. Okay, for a will to be made manifest and the promise of that will to come about, the testator has to be dead. He has to die for that will to come about. And so Jesus Christ at that Last Supper told his disciples that this is a new covenant in my blood. From that covenant, listen, every promise in the book is yours. The greatest of all is salvation. And it will be done once and for all. There will be no repeat of Jesus' death. The communion is not a repeat of Jesus Christ being sacrificed. No. We know that the Roman Catholic Church does that, but it's unscriptural, but it's unbiblical. Jesus paid the price and died once and for all. The communion is a reminder. Also, it is a declaration of what Jesus Christ has made available to each and every believer. We've got to understand, church, that God will not break his promises. And people have obviously difficulties, especially when they fail and they fail and they fail and they fail again. Would he forgive me? Would he forgive me? When we think of this covenant that Jesus Christ made once and for all, he's not going to change his mind when you fail. His love is not going to change towards you because you have failed. His promises will not be denied you because you have failed. You and I had nothing to do with this covenant. Just like Abraham had nothing to do with the covenant. God put Abraham to sleep and God himself came down and walked through those pieces. The covenant was on his part. But he promised, he vows that he will do what he says he will do. Though we slip up and we make mistakes and we fail and we feel condemned and we feel guilty, but if there is a godly remorse concerning our failure, the devil says to us, the promises that God has made to you and the things that he says he wants to do in your life won't happen because of your failures. If you don't understand that God cannot and will not break covenant, the only people that break covenant is us. We break our covenant, but we can renew our covenant. We break our covenant by we stop believing because of time that has spanned and situation that has happened. We begin to doubt and we begin to wonder. And though we may come back, something is niggling us at the back of our mind. Will God still do it because I failed? I went away from God. I was away from God for many years, or I've done this terrible thing. Will God still honor his word? Will God still honor what he spoke to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago concerning a situation that you have not seen in your life? Because God himself made the covenant in his own blood, which is better than animals' blood. That you and I can rest assured that he will fulfill what he says he will fulfill. What he says he will do, he will do. We must, we've got to stop doubting and getting into unbelief and start believing based on Christ. Amen. And what he did on Calvary. Oh my God. You see, the cross is the symbol. It is the totality of the symbol of the sacrifice. Amen. By him dying on the cross. Amen. Promises activated. Amen. The curtain in the temple that was 40 foot high and inches thick tore apart, tore in two. So we had access to the Holy of Holiest. The new covenant was established from his death on the cross. That's where our victory lies. That's why the curtain was torn in two, not from his resurrection, but from his death. That's where the victory that you and I have, that God will do what he says he will do. Amen. Don't stop trusting. Don't stop believing, church. Rekindle your faith. Rekindle your faith in what God has said. And just ask him for grace to keep you believing. As you read the scriptures, as you see the covenant and the promises that he has made. Lord, what you have done for others, you will do for me, for you are no respecters of persons. You don't have any favorites. At the cross, church, there is a level playing field for everyone. Amen. It's a level playing field. Whether you are rich, whether you're old, whether you're male, whether you're female. It doesn't matter your status or position. At the cross, it's a level playing field. All of God's promises are made available to each and every person. What it would take, though, and we go back to Abraham, the Bible says, and Abraham believed. Yes. When God spoke to him these things, the Bible says, and Abraham believed, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. So God was foreshadowing something there that will take place many years down the road. That it was his faith in God that God says he's made righteous. And so when you have faith in God, you're in right standing with God. So the promises that God has made, and he's made many over his church and many in your lives. God says you must exhibit faith. You must stir up your faith. You must have faith. Otherwise, those promises will not come to pass. Abraham is called the father of faith. He's an example for you and I to study and to read what God looks at so that he will bring to pass what he says he will do. Let me just say this. The God that we serve is a covenant-keeping God. Let's bow our heads.